Your News 3 team of meteorologists is keeping a watchful eye on the forecast, what our team is expecting this winter season, and how El Nino may affect us.
Travel plans at the mercy of Mother Nature.
Pack your patience when you're traveling during winter weather.
We're taking a look at how Norfolk International Airport prepares for winter storms and how flight delays can depend on your departure and your destination.
Leaders faced with tough decisions regarding the education and safety of your children.
We try to make the very best decision that we can make based upon the data that's there.
How winter weather impacts school systems across Hampton Roads, from bus transportation to remote learning to canceling class.
Staying warm as temperatures cool without breaking your budget. Experts share how you can save on home heating all winter long.
News 3's first warning to winter weather starts right now.
Hello and welcome to News 3's first warning to winter weather. I'm Chief Meteorologist Patrick Rocky. The whole first warning storm team is working to get you ready for what lies ahead. It's probably no surprise to you that forecasting winter weather in our part of the world is complicated. Extremely complicated. But Mother Nature usually gives us some hints about what to expect, and this year that hint is the global weather pattern called El Nino. I'm sure you've heard of El Nino. It's when water in the Pacific Ocean near the equator becomes unusually warm, which disrupts weather patterns across the globe. When there's a strong El Nino, like we're expecting this winter, we tend to see warmer temperatures in the northern half of the U.S. and wetter weather in the south. But for our part of the world, the El Nino effect isn't quite as clear. Looking back at past winters with strong El Ninos, some have been colder than normal and others have been warmer than normal. So El Nino is not a good indicator of winter temperatures where we live. But things are much clearer when it comes to precipitation. Strong El Nino years produce significantly wetter than normal winters. But more precipitation doesn't necessarily mean more snow, and I know that's what a lot of you are most interested in. So there's no correlation between our snowiest winters and strong El Nino seasons. However, we have seen a few big snows during strong El Ninos. In fact, our snowiest January on record came during the strong El Nino of 1966. That's when we received more than 14 inches of snow. And in January of 1973, a storm dumped more than 9 inches of snow. So the question on your mind is, what can we expect this winter? And here's my answer. Overall, I think it will be a warmer than normal winter in our part of the world, which works against seeing a lot of snow overall. But with above average precipitation likely, I wouldn't be surprised by 1 or 2 decent snowfalls over the next few months. Weather delays can wreck your travel plans, especially during the winter season. Meteorologist Christy Stewart found out what work is being done to keep you safe and your plans intact.
Winter storms can wreak havoc on air travel. I'm taking a look at Norfolk International Airport to see what they're doing to mitigate any delays to your travel plans. A snow and ice control plan starts getting revised in August, preparing for the worst-case scenario, which would be several days of snow in a row, even though that's rare here.
We have the responsibility to continue to remove snow off the airfield. The FAA wants us to continually treat the runways until we have the conditions that are no worse than wet.
When coming up with a plan that doesn't disrupt air traffic, the airport is dissected into different levels of priority. So during the height of a snow event, the critical areas that keep operations running are the focus of clearing efforts. A communication plan, training requirements, and needed products are discussed throughout the fall to ensure a smooth sailing operation during a snow or ice event in the winter.
Here at Norfolk, in our airfield maintenance facility, we have about 20 pieces of equipment that do our snow removal, 7 brooms, 7 plows, 5 payloaders, and 1 snow dozer.
They also have 2 de-icing trailers that use a mixture of water and propylene glycol heated to 180 degrees and 16,000 gallons of potassium acetate and some heated sand on reserve to help with pre-treatment efforts. When an event is approaching, the airport authorities work closely with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to figure out how the storm system will directly impact the airport's operations. About 72 hours out, a specific plan is made. Crew size, accommodations, and necessary equipment are figured out. About 12 hours ahead of the event, pre-treatments occur. During the winter event, their heated garage helps keep the equipment in perfect working condition. And a cool tool called the Continuous Friction Monitoring Equipment, or CFME, is broken out.
And the mission of this is to be able to, after we've plowed the runway and we've treated it, we need to know what the friction values of the runway are so that we can mimic as best we can the tires touching down to the aircraft.
A testing tire is sprayed and tests every foot of the runway to give it a friction value. This lets pilots know how the gripping action is at each third of the runway and helps them know whether to brake or use reverse thrusters in each section. The maintenance crew also keeps a snow dozer on standby. It shoots snow up to 300 feet away from the runway to avoid important markers and lights being covered up by embankments. However, having a well-thought-out plan can only prevent delays and cancellations so much.
In significant events, we can easily end up with both the aircraft and the crews being out of position, if you will, in order for the airline to maintain their scheduled routes.
Crews have required rest periods, and aircrafts can get stranded at other airports. Airlines may cancel flights ahead of time to mitigate stranding crew and aircrafts and have as little disruption as possible to the normal route flow.
And then certainly pack your patience when you're traveling during winter weather, because it has the ability to result in a lot of delays.
At Norfolk International Airport, Christy Stewart, News 3.
When snow is in the forecast, schools have to make quick decisions on whether or not to stay open. Meteorologist Miles Henderson sat down with leaders to learn how winter impacts learning.
When it comes to a snow day, the decision of school or no school, it can be tough. But for folks here at the Chesapeake Public Schools, it's all about safety.
What's great about Chesapeake is that the communication is open and the dialogue is based upon the facts that are before us.
And when winter weather threatens, that dialogue and data collection starts as early as 2 in the morning.
I have members of my staff that go out and start riding literally through neighborhoods throughout Chesapeake. We're checking bridges, we're checking overpasses, just to try to make a determination if there is any frozen precipitation, if it's starting to accumulate on the roads.
The transportation team is also in conversation with neighboring school divisions and local police departments,
so that we can use all the data that we've collected and make the best decision or best recommendation possible to our superintendent, who ultimately makes the final decision as to whether or not we're going to close, we're going to be delayed, or we're going to open as usual.
With the expansion of virtual learning, the idea of a traditional snow day has become a thing of the past.
And we tell our students to take their Chromebooks home, to be prepared, because there is some asynchronous learning that can take place right from home. And so the learning doesn't have to stop even if our schools are closed.
As we know, school provides more than just education. Missing a day of school may also mean missing a meal.
Sometimes these same buses that we use to transport students become hubs to allow students to be able to get a meal or to have those comforts that they're used to having when they're in school.
School administrators tell me it's one of the most difficult decisions they have to make, but it always goes back to what's the safest option for the kids.
We'd rather have a safe student and safe staff member and miss it on a day like this than to go the other way and have something to go wrong.
In Chesapeake, Miles Henderson, News 3.
AAA says it's important to have an emergency kit for your car. Make sure to have a charger for your phone, a flashlight with extra batteries and jumper cables, have a first aid kit, drinking water, and snacks for your passengers and any pets. You can find a full list of recommended supplies on WTKR.com. Heating your home all winter can cause energy bills to skyrocket. Meteorologist April Lovin takes a look at how you can prepare and save.
Saving money during the winter months. I'm sure we can all get on board with that. I spoke with Buddy Smith at Russell's and American Mechanical, and he shared some advice, starting with where air can get in.
Sealing up any gaps that you might have around doors, windows, whether it's caulking the gaps or if they're large enough to where you may need some kind of like a plastic sealant or even air foam sealant that comes in a can. Those can make a huge difference. Air is the enemy. When you take all of the gaps and leaks in a home and you add them all together, sometimes we end up with a really large number, equivalent of keeping a couple of windows fully open.
We know insulation is very important in keeping your home at the right temperature. Smith says check to make sure your home is insulated the right way.
The big effects of not having insulation will be felt in your feet because there's no insulation under the floor. It's relatively inexpensive to put insulation up. Same thing in the attic. If you're lacking insulation in the walls, that's much more costly to deal with, but checking your insulation is really important.
Then there's your heating and cooling system. Smith says it should be looked at once a year.
So one of the most important things that we do during HVAC maintenance would be to clean. This is the coil that's inside of, like on top of a furnace or inside of a heat pump air handler. So this gets cleaned, and then this is a nice cutaway. This side over here has been cleaned, and this is pretty common. So you can see air doesn't make it through there very well. So everything is working harder and costing you more money.
During the winter months, I'm sure everyone's thermostat ranges anywhere from 65 degrees all the way up to 75 degrees. Personally, mine is set at 70 degrees, but experts say the best temperature to have your thermostat set at is actually 68.
Set the thermostat to 120 on the water heater, and it avoids scalding, but should be warm enough to do everything you want to do with the hot water.
Smith says in the end, it's all about maintenance and keeping your systems clean and working properly. He says paying attention to the little details can save you about $32 a month.
There is much more to come on our first warning to winter weather. Next, we look at the history of a banned sledding spot and the different health risks winter brings with it. Plus, meteorologist Christy Stewart explains how the Coast Guard stays ready even as temperatures plummet.
You're watching News 3's first warning to winter weather.
When there's snow in Hampton Roads, people flock to Virginia Beach for one specific reason. We're talking about sledding on Mount Trashmore. Following a storm in the 1990s, the city banned sledding down its steepest areas, but people still got hurt. Leaders say sledders were running into fences, trees, and parked cars. Sledding was completely banned in the year 2000. The city says it's unlikely that ban will be lifted. On average, winter in our part of the world is pretty mild, so things like hypothermia and frostbite are exceedingly rare, but that doesn't mean there aren't other winter health dangers. Here are 4 that you need to look out for. First, did you know that a shovel full of snow can weigh more than 50 pounds? That means when we get a good winter storm, you could literally have to move a ton of snow off of your driveway, sidewalk, and porch. Add in frigid temperatures that can constrict blood vessels and raise your blood pressure, and you have a heightened risk for heart attacks. If you don't get those walkways cleared in time or well enough, you could face one of winter's most serious dangers. According to the Centers for Disease Control, around 1 million Americans slip and fall on the ice each year, and around 17,000 die from their injuries. That's why clearing off sidewalks and outdoor stairs is so critical in the winter. 10 times as many Americans will get seasonal affective disorder. That's 10 million of us who suffer from a depression that sets in mainly in the darker winter months. If you are one of them, don't hesitate to talk to your doctor about it. There are effective treatments for SAD, including light therapy. And speaking of light, when the lights go out during winter storms, many of us fire up portable backup generators. The fumes from those generators can be deadly. Carbon monoxide kills more than 500 Americans every year, so it is important to never use a gas generator in your house or garage, even with the doors and windows open. In fact, a running generator should be kept at least 20 feet away from your home at all times. For Coast Guard members in Hampton Roads, water rescues don't stop when the weather turns cold. Christy shows us how training changes with the seasons.
We have a pretty big boating community in Hampton Roads, and keeping you safe on the water is the Coast Guard. Station Portsmouth is one of 6 stations in the area. They train year-round, even in the depths of winter, with the Elizabeth City Air Station, conducting different hoisting evolutions and acting as a safety vessel when rescue swimmers are dropped in the water. This station alone had over 100 rescues in 2023. To prepare for these missions, the Coast Guard frequently does drills, including man overboard, search pattern, and mechanical casualty. Cold water can be more dangerous than cold air. The Coast Guard says you have 1 to 6 hours to survive in cold water. Compare that to potentially a few days in warm water. That's why the Coast Guard trains with different personal protective equipment in the cold water. They have a 3-layer system that includes a wicking layer to keep sweat absorbed, a fleece suit to keep them warm, and a shell to keep them dry with rubber gasket neck and wrist seals. This is paired with a neoprene hood to help prevent body heat escaping too quickly, thermal-lined boots with a steel shank in the middle, and gloves. Compare that to their summer suits that are thinner and lightly insulated with flotation equipment inside the material. They test their equipment by treading water for 10 minutes, swimming 100 yards, and sitting in the huddle position to make sure there are no leaks. The Coast Guard urges you to have the proper equipment yourself and dress for the water temperature, not the air temperature.
If they, for any reason, enter the water, the likelihood of hypothermia or cold water shock is highly likely, and then they become a search and rescue case in itself.
If you're out on the water, have a flotation device, insulated equipment that has a USCG approved tag, a VHF radio, the Coast Guard continuously monitors channel 16, emergency distress flares, a cell phone with battery backup, and share your float plan with a friend and check in with them at your checkpoints. It's also important to continuously monitor the weather. Our first warning storm team has you covered there. If you happen to go overboard in cold water and can't get out of the water, stay calm but act fast.
Proven theory that the first minute is your toughest minute to survive, because you'll actually, once you enter the water in a cold water environment, you will actually lose control of breathing. So roughly it takes a minute to get your breathing under control, and then 10 minutes you have to control your muscles, and within 10 minutes you can probably lose all muscle control of trying to stay afloat. So that's why we're always pushing flotation equipment.
If you're stuck in the water, get into a huddle position to keep the most warmth in your body. It can take up to 1 hour for the Coast Guard to reach their outer jurisdiction areas. However, they do coordinate with other agencies and marine patrols that may be closer to the incident to speed up response time. At United States Coast Guard Small Boat Station Portsmouth, Christy Stewart, News 3.
When the storms come and your power is knocked out, crews jump into action to get everything restored across the region. April spoke with Dominion Energy workers about the challenges winter can bring.
It's some kind of serious here when you're out at this time of the weather, and you want everybody to go home to their family.
And with 37 years at Dominion Energy, Johnny Walker knows a thing or two about the dangers of the job. The construction operations supervisor tells me he's extra careful during the cold winter months. He remembers one particular ice storm that caused a big mess.
It's the fact that the snow and ice was so heavy. When we get it lands on the trees and the limb, and all these limbs were just weighing down. So what happened with all the weight? The trees start snapping, the limbs start popping. So as we was trying to put up lines and get them back up, we got them up, get lights on, and before you know it, another tree done failed to snap and fall across the line and break it.
You probably notice a lot more lines are being put underground. Walker says when there's an overhead problem, you can look up and see it right away. When the lines are underground, it's not as easy.
First of all, the ground is cold. So the ground is cold, it's hard. And when it's hard, and most of the time this time of year when it's the cold, our ground hold a little moisture. So now we digging in mud. And digging with mud is heavy. It's just trying to scoop it up.
So we were tasked with digging this in and cutting out the old cable, and I can show you in here a little bit better what it looks like. So this transformer is energized. So you have your cable coming in, and that's the primary side of the transformer, and then you have your cable going out, which feeds the rest of the transformers in line.
Ethan Seller specializes in underground lines with Dominion. He showed me how they keep lines safe from the elements.
That's what that tape is right there, because when we have to strip everything back to terminate this cable the way it has to be done, you have to waterproof it so water can't get down in the cable and cause something to go bad.
According to Dominion Energy, burying these lines, which provides electricity to neighborhoods and homes, reduces the number of repairs needed for service restoration after a big storm. But where we live, flooding can be a challenge. Seller tells me they have a way to work around it.
A lot of the times in those areas, they'll put the transformers up on those raised concrete pads, or we have some that are like synthetic fiberglass material.
Still, Dominion is undergrounding as many lines as it can, almost 2,000 miles so far. The goal is to bury a total of 4,000 miles of the most outage-prone overhead lines over the next several years.
Because things is always improving with us, always. We're always looking for something better to improve to make things safer for us and our customers.
Bringing winter sports to Hampton Roads. Next, meteorologist Miles Henderson walks us through the ice-making process for the Norfolk Admirals.
You're watching News 3's first warning to winter weather.
With winter comes ice and snow for many, and in the world of sports, that means lacing up the skates for ice hockey. Meteorologist Miles Henderson explains the work that goes into bringing the cold weather game to Hampton Roads.
Before thousands of screaming fans pile into the Norfolk Scope, I got to look behind the scenes at the ice making process inside and under the scope. And get this, it doesn't start with ice or water, it starts with paint. After installing boards around the perimeter of the rink, the ice crew sprays a coat of white paint on the concrete floor. Next, they hand paint the blue and red lines and the face-off circles. Once the paint dries, it's time to start making ice, with the freezing coming from underneath.
They keep the floor somewhere between 16 to 22 degrees, very cold.
Glycol is pumped through the tubes running inside the concrete floor, freezing each layer of water as it's sprayed on the surface. While the crew continues adding layers of water, they place the ice logos, which actually look more like a mesh screen than a decal.
Once you get your stencils in, you seal them in, make sure they're nice and smooth, so you know they look nice and glossy, like a portrait.
As the layers of ice continue to stack up, the crew puts up the glass around the rink.
Big, heavy pieces of glass, 200, 300 pounds. You need at least four to six people to put them up.
Once the process is complete, the ice is about 3/4 of an inch thick. Then we're ready to drop the puck. Even though the ice surface is indoors and kept cool from underneath, it can still be impacted by the weather.
When it starts to get warm, yeah, a lot of moisture comes inside the building, and that's something that we try to fight.
And the Admirals players I talked to say they can notice a difference in how the ice feels.
Sometimes it's choppy, sometimes it's soft, it's hard. It really depends on the weather outside. When it's colder, the ice definitely tends to be harder.
Well, I was down in Florida a little bit. We had a preseason game there, and I mean, yeah, it's a little different, but once you get on the ice, it's the same game.
In Norfolk, Miles Henderson, News 3.
If you haven't already, download the News 3 app on your phone. You can get first warning storm alerts all year long. It's free at WTKR.com/apps. And we thank you so much for joining us for News 3's first warning to winter weather. We hope you now have a better idea of how the season impacts us across the region. As temperatures drop and you want to see what's next, make sure you tune to News 3.